Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. If members wish to remove their jackets, they may do so. May I remind members and members of the public that the meeting will be streamed live on a webcast from the Council's website. Item 1, apologies. I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Curley. Item 2. Is Council agreed that the Council minutes from the meeting held on the 10th of July 2019 are agreed as a correct record of the meeting? Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members in respect of matters to be determined by the Council at this meeting? Councillors M. Bashforth, Chauhan and Frida Hussain have a personal interest at item 8D due to their previous council appointments to the Mallorca board. Can members declare any matters to the meeting? And there also will be a form circulated around the chamber for members to complete if they have an interest. Councillor Hamblett, you indicated. Right, okay, thank you.
Madam Mallorca, item 8D.
Item 4, urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Item 5, communications. I have had communication that former councillor Ray Mallinson has sadly passed away recently, and I have had notification that a member wishes to speak. Councillor Harrison to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was very sad to hear of the death of former councillor Ray Mallinson in July. I got to know Ray in the mid-80s when I was an officer of the Waterhead Ward, the Waterhead Labour Party. And he was selected as our candidate and duly elected in 1986. He did one term of office. Previously to that, he'd served on the Royton Urban District Council from 1972 to 1974 before the creation of the Oldham Metropolitan Borough. As well as being a fantastic ward councillor, Ray served on the Development Services Committee, the Environmental Health and Control, the Finance Subcommittee and the Road Safety Advisory Subcommittee. As I was going through the faces on the council, I could only think of Peter Dean, who might have actually served with Ray in the 80s. But I know that he was a very committed and hard-working councillor. He was a staunch socialist, and the local press, not our friend at the time, called him Red Ray. And it was meant to be damaging, but Ray loved it because socialism ran through his veins. And his was the type of socialism that strives to improve the lives of the people that he lives among and that he served. And he worked tirelessly in Waterhead Ward to do that for the people who'd elected him and who he represented. He was also a staunch trade unionist. He was a member of the AUEU and he was the shop steward at Seddon Atkinson for many years. And he was on the Oldham Trades Council. Through both his councillorship and his trade union work, he campaigned hard for better rights and conditions for people and for workers. After he lost his seat in Waterhead Ward. The political tide was turning a little at that time. But unlike some people of that era, instead of spitting out his dummy, throwing his rattle out of the pram, he stayed loyal to the Labour Party. He continued to serve the Labour Party and to work hard in the Labour Party throughout the ensuing years. He was an active fundraiser for the Labour Party, setting up socials, fun days, car boot sales and many other types of events to raise funds for the cause that he believed in. And until fairly recently, he still attended Royton North branch meetings. As well as his political life, or perhaps more importantly, Ray was also a great family man. He was a loving husband, dad and granddad, and I know that they will miss him deeply. Deepest condolences to his family. Thank you.
Councillor Sykes.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Briefly, I can agree with everything Councillor Harrison has said. I had the joy of actually serving on both Environmental Health and Control Committee, as it used to be, and the Finance Subcommittee with Ray. And I'm glad you mentioned him as Red Ray. He was very proud of that badge and wore it with honour. And he was a proper socialist, because I could understand what he wanted, I could understand what he represented, and while we might not always agree, we had a mutual respect for one another. He was hard working in terms of his work on a committee, not somebody who'd speak for the sake of it, but when he thought there was something that needed to be changed or was unjust, he used to worry it like a dog did with a bone, and did make some really important changes, but quite small in some senses, but very important and very big to the citizens he served. His work was unstinting as both a trade unionist and for the Trades Council, and it was, you know, and like I say, he was a very active resident in Royton North, and that's where I sort of came across him after he'd stood down off the council and in other things. So my condolences to his family. He was only on the council for a short time, but made a solid and significant contribution, Madam Mayor.
Please could we all stand and have a minute's silence in memory of Ray Mallinson. Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. Item 6, petitions. There are no petitions to note. Item 7, Youth Council. There is no Youth Council business. Item 8, question time. This part of the agenda is question time, where Council will consider all questions submitted, starting with public questions. There is a 15-minute time limit for public questions. If the time limit has expired and a member of the public has submitted a question for consideration, the question and response will be published on the Council's website. The first question has been received by Eddie Keating. I believe he's not here. I call on Councillor Raymond to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I also thank Eddie Keating for submitting his question, which is around parking issues around the residential areas of Oldham Royal Hospital. Madam Mayor, there is an ongoing increasing high demand for on-street parking around Oldham Royal Hospital. Due to the volumes at this time, adding additional residents-only parking areas on an estate-by-estate basis cannot be seen as a solution, as it will result now in displacing parking to other nearby residential areas. Local residents were consulted and they were not in favour of residential parking. Councillor Jabbar and Councillor Malik, I believe, have been in contact with Mr Keating on this issue. And the Council is working with the hospital. The Council is currently carrying out a review of its town centre parking strategy. In addition, the Royal Oldham Trust have commissioned the Oldham Hospital Master Plan, which will consider parking needs strategically in addition to other matters. The outcomes of these strategic reviews will seek to propose solutions that will either make further residents-only parking schemes in the area either unnecessary or be viable to be implemented. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
The next question has been submitted by Yvonne O'Mara. I call on Councillor Roberts to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yvonne O'Mara has asked me about Real Change Oldham and what the council can do to promote this new organisation. So just for the benefit of members, Real Change Oldham is a new local partnership that aims to ensure no one stays or becomes homeless due to a lack of money for essential items that we might all take for granted. It supports some of our most vulnerable residents, giving practical support to cover essential costs. Donations go directly towards practical items people need to build their lives away from the streets. Things like ID to register with a landlord, bus fares to get to key appointments, or money for an electric meter to settle into their new home. And there are lots of ways that the council, members and everyone else can help in raising awareness of the Real Change Oldham campaign. By sharing the campaign on social media, there's lots of information available on the website. Become a Real Change ambassador and introduce the partnership to a business or community group you're in touch with. Get an image or poster from the homelessness team here at the council and use it in a newsletter or a display. Invite someone from the campaign along to talk to a community event, conference or team activity to talk about what they're doing. Hold a fundraising event like a bake sale, or run the campaign to raise, or run so that the campaign can raise funds to cover essential costs. Real Change Oldham is looking for volunteers with connections to entrepreneurs and businesses in the borough to get the word out about how they can contribute to ending homelessness in our area. You could also follow the example of our Oldham Youth Mayor, who has adopted Real Change Oldham as her charity for this year in office. You can also go, like I have, along to Oldham Library and place a bid on one of the artworks produced by the Our Oldham project, which is also raising money for Real Change Oldham. Or you could just make a donation at realchangeoldham.co.uk. I'd urge everyone to get involved in the partnership approach to ending homelessness and preventing homelessness, and together we can bring about real change in Oldham.
The next question has been submitted by Trevor Widder via email. I call on Councillor Raymond to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I thank Mr Trevor Widder? His question is relating to double yellow line car parking on Broadbent Road and Ripponden Road and the lack of tickets that have been issued. Madam Mayor, our civil enforcement officers enforce the whole of the borough, and when vehicles are seen to be in contravention of the restrictions, they will be issued with a penalty notice. If the driver is present, they will be given the opportunity to remove their vehicle from that area before a penalty charge notice is issued. I have, however, requested that this area is given extra attention by the officers over the coming weeks and try to alleviate illegal or inconsiderate parking. However, Madam Mayor, it must be noted that during the observation time, to see if loading or unloading is taking place, drivers may return to their car and drive away. Any blue badge holders can park on double yellow lines for up to 3 hours. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question has been submitted by Simon Nicholson via email. I call on Councillor Shah to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The question that Mr Nicholson has asked is what our position is and what we're doing about the use of fireworks in the borough, especially late at night, and what means are being used to enforce the law as people are blatantly flaunting it at present. So the actual issue of enforcement against the use of fireworks during nighttime hours is a police enforcement responsibility. However, the council were involved in a Greater Manchester-wide operation named Operation Treacle that pulls together activity from councils, Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue and the police. The trading standards team from the council are involved in proactive work, focusing on underage sales and safety standards of the products. The team also sends safety and advisory information out to all points of sale, as well as reacting to any intelligence reported from members of the public. All other enforcement activity, including the licensing of premises that sell fireworks, is carried out by Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue. The council is also, once again, holding its Big Bang bonfire and fireworks spectacular on Tuesday the 5th of November this year, when residents and visitors in Oldham can enjoy the occasion in a safe environment. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question has been submitted by Geoffrey Schofield via email. I call on Councillor Shah to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Mr Schofield basically runs a community clean-up group called Hathershaw Litter Busters and gets support from the council, and was wondering to report and prosecute fly tipping and antisocial behaviour. Could we have some cameras, he asks, around Hathershaw, seeing as he believes there are funds available. I want to thank him for his question, and first of all, I'd like to express my appreciation and thanks to Mr Schofield for all the hard work he does and the community clean-up group carry out in Hathershaw. I can confirm that as a council we have 4 deployable cameras already located around Hathershaw in the areas where persistent issues of both fly tipping and antisocial behaviour have been reported. I'd also like to suggest to Mr Schofield that if I could ask an officer to arrange to meet him to discuss any further opportunities where we can work together, as well as explaining the justification we need before we can consider any new possible sites for CCTV. Thank you.
The next question has been submitted by Anthony Prince via email. I call on Councillor Jabbar to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the question is about how many places of worship in Oldham pay no business rate. A domestic property that is a place of public worship is exempt from the business rate under the Schedule 5 of the Local Government Finance Act 1988. The valuation agency, rather than the council, would decide whether property should be exempted. Any buildings which are exempted by the valuation agency do not appear in the rating list which the council uses to calculate a bill for business rates. So the council cannot advise as to the number of places of worship for which no business rates are payable. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The final question has been submitted by John Power via email. I call on Councillor Fielding to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before I respond to this question, I just think it's worth mentioning, for the benefit of the thousands of regular viewers that we get of the council meeting, why it might appear that we're doing question time slightly differently this evening. We normally, Madam Mayor, of course, you normally read out the questions and we respond to them as members of the Cabinet. However, tonight, instead of requiring the Mayor to read out the questions, in order to make it so that more questions can be fit in within the allotted time, we have suggested that the Mayor does not read them out and that in their answers, the Cabinet members who respond can cover what the question is getting at in their response. But for transparency's sake, I can confirm that the questions that were asked tonight, as submitted, will be published on the website, as the ones that we don't normally get to usually are. But my question tonight from Mr Power, and I'd like to thank Mr Power for his question, was in relation to a U-turn that he perceives that I have suggested regarding building residential accommodation in the town centre, its relationship with the Knowles Lane planning application in Groton and Lees, alleged false statements that were made around Opal, and asking me whether it is a conflict of interest that Councillor Hume had a vote on the planning committee on the recent Knowles Lane planning application when he is the son of Councillor Roberts, who is the cabinet member for housing. I'm not certain what U-turn it is that I'm perceived to have made. Ever since I became the leader of the council in May of 2018, it has been clear that it is my ambition to build as many residential units as possible in the town centre to support the local economy that we are trying to build there. If a byproduct of that is that it allows us to take the pressure off our Greenbelt allocations that we're required to make as part of the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, then all is the better. Of course, the recent Knowles Lane planning application, 50% of that site was already a designated housing site. I admit that an additional area of land which is designated as Opal, a proportion of that adjacent to the designated housing site is proposed to be developed upon, but none of that land was Greenbelt, and so the decisions around the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework have no bearing on that. I can also confirm that it does not preclude Councillor Hume from voting on planning matters on the planning committee by virtue of his relationship with Councillor Roberts either. And so I hope that covers all of the points that Mr Power has made in his question. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The next part of this section is questions to Leader and Cabinet with a time limit of 30 minutes. I have advance notice of questions. The Leader of the main opposition will ask his questions. I call on the Leader to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to bring to your attention a rather unpleasant and what I regard as slightly underhand news that the Greater Manchester Combined Authority are planning to tax the elderly residents of this borough before they can even board a tram. Pensioners who currently enjoy free travel on public transport across Greater Manchester are being forced to pay an annual fee if they want to travel from A to B on Metrolink. The new charge will be £10, whereas before it was free. This new tax will be live, as I understand it, in early January 2020. I hope we plan to communicate this to our elderly residents in the borough. We also must think about if this new strategy should be means tested or just rolled out to everyone regardless of their own personal circumstances. The national law states free travel for the over 65 on buses, but from next year any pensioner wanting to claim free travel on Greater Manchester Train and Metrolink tram network will be forced to pay an annual administration charge. This £10 charge is simply a hidden Labour stealth tax on our elderly. OAPs must pay for TV licences and struggle with heating and other bills in winter. Information freely available on the NHS website says hundreds of thousands of elderly people are cut off from society and suffer from loneliness. This applies especially to the over 75s, and over 1 million of these older people live alone. It begs the sad question, why did the Labour Party at the last full council meeting in July say they want to maintain free TV licences for the over 65, but now plan to charge those same pensioners for claiming their right to entitled free travel? Please explain this to me, because I and a lot of other people are very puzzled by it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I call on the Leader to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I must start by saying that it is dishonest of the Leader of the Opposition to claim that this is a stealth tax. He did correctly refer to it later on in the question as the £10 administration charge, and it is a £10 administration charge for the additional benefit of travelling for free on Metrolink trams and trains within the Greater Manchester conurbation. Free bus travel remains free, and despite the way others have tried to spin it in the media, free bus travel remains free and there is no charge for the pass to gain that. The administration charge is the cost of loading on the additional free benefit of free travel on the Metrolink and heavy rail network in Greater Manchester. The £10 administration charge brings this into line with the administration charge that holders of other passes throughout the Greater Manchester conurbation also pay, such as the new Hour Pass, which has provided free bus travel and additional benefits in terms of leisure and cultural offer, as designed by the Greater Manchester Labour Mayor Andy Burnham. Our pass carries a £10 administration charge. The Waspy Pass, which again was brought in by Greater Manchester's Labour Mayor Andy Burnham to close the injustice between free travel and the pension age changes that WASPy women have seen. That carries a £10 administration charge. And the IGO passes, which allow young children who go to school on the bus to pay concessionary fares. Each IGO pass also carries a £10 administration charge. So the introduction of the £10 administration charge for the additional Metrolink and heavy rail benefit is simply bringing that into line with the charges that all other people who access similar passes pay and have paid for a long time. And the money raised from the £10 administration charges is all ring-fenced to be reinvested in transport projects throughout Greater Manchester. So for a small charge of £10 or 19 pence a week, that will raise, it is expected, in excess of £1 million that can go towards things like bus franchising, which I know members of all parties in this chamber would like to see, go towards things like Metrolink extensions, and go towards things like improving the quality of heavy rail services in Greater Manchester when we finally get the devolved powers that we are calling for to control our heavy rail services in the city region rather than having them controlled by the Department for Transport in London. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry. Let's go to your second question.
Please. Madam Mayor, thank you. Thank the leader for his answer to my previous question. The other one, my next question is a topic I'll return to again, which is the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework proposals. Madam Mayor, it's widely known that the GMSF, Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, will build upon large chunks of our borough's untouched and finite green belt and green spaces, including valuable protected open space. This is a persisting issue in the borough, and there have been mass demonstrations and organised protests against these proposals. This wide-ranging plan will decide the future of the borough for generations. I have yet to hear which Oldham Council meeting will discuss the proposals detailed in the framework and for the Council to discuss and agree the terms laid out in the strategy. Given the importance of the subject, it would be wise, in my opinion, and in the Liberal Democrats' opinion, that Oldham Borough have a special one-item agenda council meeting about the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. Can the leader confirm when the much-promised GMSF proposals will see the light of day? Can the leader confirm that Oldham Council will hold a special one-item agenda meeting to discuss, agree and comment on the published GMSF proposals, whenever that might be? And that there will be consultation on when that special meeting might be held and a significant long notice given to when it will be held. If there is no special meeting planned, which ordinary meeting of the Council will this important matter be shoehorned into? Thank you, Madam.
I call on the leader to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the Leader of the Opposition for his question on the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. I have to say that I share his frustration at the amount of time that this has now dragged on for. I would like nothing more than to be able to finally put to bed the issues and give people out there in Oldham a clear answer on where it is proposed to release land for development for the houses that we are determined as having to build by the Office for National Statistic figures that the government requires to use. Unfortunately, the turmoil in Westminster, the change of Prime Minister and the change of government and the possible change of government again means that there is very little certainty coming out of Westminster around what figures we will be expected to use on population to determine the number of houses, when they will confirm those to us, and that leaves us in a kind of limbo. On the one hand, my understanding from conversations at Greater Manchester level is that the government would like us to reduce the amount of greenbelt released for development. But on the other hand, they are also insisting that we use the 2014 Office for National Statistic population projections, which is impossible to deliver on without releasing greenbelt for development. And until we get a clear answer out of the government, I am not in a position to confirm when that will come forward, when we will have the special meeting of Council, which I am in agreement we will need to agree these proposals and allow them sufficient time to be aired and be sufficiently open and transparent on this issue. When we are in a position to confirm that and to confirm the method by which it will come to Council, the usual consultation method will take place, as normally happens when we move or change or call additional constituted meetings of this Council via group leaders. I look forward to having those conversations with Councillor Sykes, and I hope that they will come forward soon to clear things in my mind, as well as his, the members here and all of the members of the public out there listening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The Leader of the Minority Opposition to ask a question. Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Because I am very worried about local democracy, and as the leaders just said, the turmoil at Westminster, I am going to ask this question. We were told that the district executives had a £700,000 underspend. As such, which district executives and wards failed to spend their full allocation, and why does this council not trust local ward councillors to be accountable in spending ratepayers' money in their wards? I feel it's a necessary question because people of all parties are asked, and all genders and all political things are asking me this, and I can't give the answer. So I hope the leader will shed some light on this, because it is seen in the borough to be another nail in the side of local democracy.
I call upon the Leader to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can confirm to the Leader of the Conservative Group that underspends were represented across all district executive areas in the borough. I can also challenge his assertion that we do not trust local members to spend money. That claim is somewhat undermined by the fact that we increased from 5,000 to 6,000 the allowance that individual members have to spend within those wards. If that is not greater trust in local members to determine what is important priorities in their local areas, then I do not know what is. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Ahmed to ask a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, Waterhead Academy recently won the National Inclusive School Award. It's a national accolade for a local school. Will the Cabinet Member for Education and Skills join me in congratulating Waterhead Academy on this amazing achievement?
Thank you. I call on Councillor Mushtaq to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Ahmed, for the question. And the answer is yes, I will join you in congratulating Waterhead Academy on this award. As you're aware, and a lot of people in the room are aware, I did used to be a governor at Waterhead Academy when it was formed. So I am fully aware of the challenges and the backdrop and the context, which doesn't come into the question, against which the school was striving to ensure social cohesion. There was a lot of negativity around it, and there was a lot of disbelief that it could be achieved. So I think the award goes a long way to proving that actually it was a very successful effort. And yes, congratulations once again to them.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Chauhan to ask a question.
Madam Mayor, recently posts have been shared on social media and allegations subsequently repeated in letters to local newspapers that undue influence was exerted on members of the planning committee to direct them to vote in a certain way at a recent planning committee meeting. Could the Leader advise Council on the veracity of these claims? Thank you.
I call on Councillor Fielding to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think the essence of some of these claims that have been made is symptomatic of something that we see wider in society today for some reason, where those who hold different views to our own, rather than it being accepted that some people might, in receipt of the same information as we receive, in having digested the same information and details that we received, might arrive at a different view to that one which we hold ourselves. Planning committee is a quasi-judicial function within the council. It is something where members are required to attend with an open mind, And I have faith in members of all parties that attended the planning committee to which some of these posts referred, and all planning committees. Having been a member of a planning committee myself in previous years and voted for decisions that have made me unpopular, I have faith in the members of the planning committee in this council that they attend all of those meetings with an open mind, and there are no decisions made prior to the evidence being given, whether it be by members, members of the public and the Office of Representations in writing and verbally at the meetings. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Gary to ask a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could the Cabinet Member for Finance comment on the spending review announced by the Chancellor? Will the money granted to local government meet Oldham's needs, particularly in adult and children's services? Thank you.
I call on Councillor Jabbar to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Gary, for your question. Very important question. The short answer is no. However, when the Chancellor presented this spending round, it contains some good news, but only covered one financial year. Whilst there were a range of funding announcements, it was very pleasing to hear him confirm, firstly, that there would be no reduction in government departmental day-to-day budget, giving an assurance that the general council funding would continue at this year's level. We had been concerned that there might be a further reduction in that grant. Secondly, 2.5 billion of existing social care grant will continue with further £1 billion of grant promised. Again, it had been concerned, there had been some concern that this might have ceased. So clearly, those two elements of the announcement we do welcome. Thirdly, there will also be an additional funding for school, a national total of 2.6 billion in 2021, including 700 million for high needs. Again, most welcome given the challenges faced in Oldham schools. Whilst the individual authority allocation are yet to be announced, this is much better than what we anticipated. But it does not go far enough to reverse the effects of austerity. Since 2009-10, the Council has been forced to make budget cuts of £216 million. So I just repeat, £216 million, which has had massive impact on Oldham. New research by the TUC and the New Economics Foundation think tank has found that the government funding cuts will leave local authorities with a £25 billion black hole, leading to more cuts to services and increasing the chances of more councils being forced to declare bankrupt. To summarise, it is pleasing news. However, far more needs to be done to restore the funding levels and allow meaningful financial planning. And just to confirm that when ministers and government say austerity is over, it certainly isn't over as far as Oldham Council is concerned. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have a question from the Liberal Democrat Group member, please? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Crompton councillors are receiving complaints about the Crompton House School expansion build. The complaints are mainly about the hours of construction, vehicle movements and the clear breach of planning condition 27, which states, sorry about this, I can't see very well, during construction and demolition, no vehicular movements from construction vehicles to and from and or within the site shall take place except between 7:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. each day, Monday to Saturday, and at no times on Sundays or bank holidays and public holidays. Despite warnings, the contractor has ignored this condition, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times, and that is just on a Sunday. There are more breaches during the weekdays as well. Will Oldham Council reassure residents who have photographs and videos to evidence these breaches which we have seen, that they will use the full force of our planning enforcement officers and prosecute the contractor for breaches in planning conditions, and that there will be no further future breaches of condition 27. After all, what is the point in putting in a planning condition if we are going to do nothing about it and let contractors do what they want with no consequences? It should also be noted that this contractor was commissioned by Oldham Council Unity Partnership to carry out this particular project. So if we cannot get our own house in order, what chance have we got with others? In addition, this contractor has a lot to answer for failing to deliver the school build on time, resulting in the years 10 and 11 not returning back to school on time. Perhaps the Cabinet member would like to comment on that as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Can the relevant Cabinet member respond, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think most of that falls within my responsibilities, I think. So clearly, yes, the planning enforcement officers will take action, but they will need evidence in order to be able to do so. So I would urge Councillor Williamson and local residents to submit their any evidence that they have to the head of planning, so that he can interim head of planning, sorry, so that he can pass it on to the enforcement officers so they can take action. Clearly, I can't guarantee what the outcome of any action may be without the evidence having been examined as to whether or not it's sufficient to support a prosecution. In terms of Unity Partnership and the delivery of the project is concerned, my understanding is that the delivery was a week late, and that nonetheless the school is now open and the new build is complete, and that in terms of providing good facilities for local children, that this is something that we should welcome.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Davies to ask a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been asked on quite a few occasions recently by members of the public about the availability of affordable 4-bed homes in the borough. It appears when more affordable 4-bed homes and larger are up for sale, they are being sold to developers who are turning them into HMOs. I understand there is a shortage of larger homes in Oldham, and would it be possible to stop them being turned into HMOs so families who require this type of property have a chance to remain in the borough and have no need to move away?
Thank you. I call on Councillor Roberts to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the number of Councillor Davis's question, I think, is the difficulties that are caused by developers buying up larger family homes and turning them into houses of multiple occupation, HMOs. Clearly, developers are competing in an open market and may be able to outbid residents in buying what is available on the market. Conversion is currently permitted under permitted development to a 3 to 6 bed HMO, and it doesn't need planning permission, which means clearly that the council's powers of intervention are rather weak. Now, if there is clear evidence to demonstrate that converting large houses to HMOs is causing serious problems, then it is possible, I am informed, to issue an Article 4 direction to remove permitted development rights to convert a dwelling to an HMO. This is not straightforward, as it is removing somebody's legal right to do something. However, there are examples where this has been achieved. We would need to show that there are a high concentration of HMOs being formed that are affecting local neighbourhoods, and it's most likely that this would have to be demonstrated in a restricted area rather than across the borough as a whole. Evidence of serious problems will be needed, for example, changes to the character of an area or in terms of parking, rubbish or neighbour nuisance. Officers have begun to collate numbers of HMOs, but more will be needed to achieve a direction. If members feel it would be helpful to discuss evidence gathering further, the strategic planning team can help. The issues about housing need and the data we have collated to support the housing strategy come into play at the planning application stage. And should we be successful in removing permitted development rights, permission would still be needed to convert a home into an HMO, but this would be determined on a case-by-case basis, and at that stage we'd be able to look at local housing need and whether or not that provided the basis for refusing a planning application.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Hewitt to ask a question.
On the 2nd of September, I phoned my doctor for an appointment and was given the date of the 3rd of October, a wait of just over a month. What provision will be put in place when Burt's Quarry, Stone Breaks and Knowles Valley developments, over 700 houses, are built for access to doctors and other public services? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Roberts to respond.
Thank Councillor Hewitt for his question. So planning permission has been granted for up to 265 new homes on Knowles Lane, and I understand that consultation has taken place on the development of 213 homes at Springhead Quarry, also known as Stone Breaks, while Burke's Quarry has 36 homes allocated in the Schlar. The Council has a well-established process for ensuring there are sufficient school places available as populations grow and shift, and St Agnes' School will be gifted land as part of the planning agreement on Knowles Lane, which should insist in this. The CCG does not anticipate the new developments will have a destabilising effect on any one GP practice, as there are 13 practices within 2 miles of the Knowles Valley site. More generally, the CCG is taking steps to ensure good access to GPs for both routine and urgent appointments. An additional 520 appointments are available every week at evenings and weekends, which can be booked on 0161 934 2827. I understand that quite often when people phone their GP practices, that information isn't readily given out, so it's worth making a note of the number. There are currently 7,000 households in housing need in the borough who are already using GPs, schools and other public services. Evidence from recent developments such as Thorpe Road in Royton and Broadway Green is that most people who move into these new homes are already living in the borough, either locally or further afield. For example, shared ownership offers people the opportunity to move from the private rented sector, or affordable rent offers young people the chance to leave the family home and set up by themselves. It would be wrong to assume that 514 homes in total means 514 extra families needing public services.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Shuttleworth to ask a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The opportunity for residents of this borough to directly ask questions of the administration at full council is a positive one, which was welcomed by elected members when first introduced some years ago by the then leader of the council, Jim McMahon. Many residents have seized this opportunity either in person or via email and have done so in a positive way. Unfortunately, very much a minority have seen such an open and transparent opportunity to create a disturbance once they have asked their question, and on one recent occasion a member of the public harangued the leader from the public area when he went to the water fountain. Councillors are rightly subject to a code of conduct, and while I don't know, nor should I know, how many such complaints are submitted, this is the right afforded to residents if they believe they've been wronged. Having said all that, may I ask the leader that, taking this into account, does he agree with me that residents should also conduct themselves, either by question or from the public area, in a manner which they rightly expect from elected members, be this face-to-face or in this chamber? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Fielding to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Shuttleworth for his question and for his concern for my welfare. I have been a councillor in Failsworth for almost 8 years now, and that has had some challenging times where I've had to deal with some of the circumstances that Councillor Shuttleworth has highlighted. But I do welcome his question this evening and allow us to highlight the fact that we are an open and transparent council. We've made it easier for people to ask questions here at full council, and we welcome people asking questions that are sometimes difficult for us to answer and challenging. If, as some people like to allege outside of this room, we were somehow not transparent and somehow dishonest, why would we invite people in to stand at that lectern over there and ask questions directly to us? We very much welcome the opportunity for residents to engage directly with councillors in this forum, and in other forums, at residents' meetings and at surgeries and wherever else it may be that you find councillors in an accessible location. Councillor Shuttleworth is correct that councillors do have to adhere to a code of conduct. Only this week I sent out details of the code of conduct to residents who were dissatisfied with some of my behaviour, and I directed them how they could make a complaint about me if they saw fit. But we should expect that when we open up council to allow people to come and engage with us directly, that good behaviour is also reciprocated, and Councillor Shuttleworth is absolutely right. So I stand here inviting questions to council, inviting more questions, because I do not believe that we used all of the time that was allotted for public questions this evening, but also to accept that this is a very we have processes and we have procedures in this council chamber, and we would ask that people respect those, and you will get the answer that that it is within our gift to give at the time that you ask it. So thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have a question from a Liberal Democrat group member?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a question about the Council's 5-year housing supply, or rather the problem that is the lack of one, which is causing problems when it comes to objections on planning applications, decisions being biased in favour of developments, given that the Council fails to have that plan in place, or that housing supply in place. When is it going to get a 5-year housing supply plan, and why does it not have one already? Thank you.
Right, okay, that's an interesting question. So, yeah, it's quite correct. We do not have a 5-year housing land supply, and that does mean that there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development in terms of the applications that are put in front of the Planning Committee. It is also true to say that as we failed the housing delivery test, this reinforces that position. The Council's housing land supply is published annually and will be updated later on in the year. And the details of the current position, including the wonderfully named SHLA, are available on the Council's website. One of the issues which the GMSF is attempting to address is issues of land supply, and the excuse me, the longer-term planning, which a 20-year plan allows us to do, partly helps us to address some of the issues around land supply by, if we look at what we need over a 20-year period, and if we're able to say that we think that land will be coming forward further down the line, then we can use that as a defence against having to agree and apply the presumption of sustainable development. So part of the reason for being involved in the GMSF process is to try to protect the Council's position in the longer term. That's kind of leaving aside the controversy that there is about some of the sites which are under selection. I am fully in support of the principle of us being involved in that kind of plan because it helps us in the longer term around some of those things. I'm afraid that I'm not in a position to be able to say when we will have a 5-year housing land supply, because clearly the land in the borough is not under the control of the council, and we are reliant on sites coming forward, on landowners and developers putting both land being made available and developers coming forward with viable proposals. It would assist us greatly if the government made some changes to its policies, particularly if it reinstated the policy of helping us to make brownfield land suitable to build on and economic to build on. It would also help us greatly if the government changed the way that it manages the many billions of pounds it's given to Homes England in terms of subsidies and what we could be entitled to apply for to meet the housing need in the borough. So I'm afraid that we are in the position where we do the best we can. On an annual basis, we scan the borough, we talk to people, we put into the land supply everything that we can find, but equally we can't, I'm afraid, just find more land that doesn't exist. And the best that we can do is to plan and to campaign to get the resources that we need in order to be able to develop more of the brownfield land that everybody would like to see used more sustainably and to the benefit of local people. Thank you. Unfortunately, we've now run out of time for Cabinet questions.
The next part of this session is questions on Cabinet minutes. I call on Councillor Fielding to move and Councillor Shah to second that Council notes the minutes of the Cabinet as circulated.
Move, Madam Mayor.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Do any members who are not Cabinet members wish to ask a question on the Cabinet minutes? Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's the minutes from the Cabinet on the 24th of the 6th, 19, minute 12, page 40, under Highway Improvement Programme Update. And I was just wondering whether the Cabinet member for Neighbourhood Services was aware that Highways England are funding trials into rubber roads made through waste tyres. Perhaps we can get a few more roads done in Oldham. I could certainly point you to some in Crompton that would benefit. And would you put your hat in the ring for some funding so we can get a few more roads done? Thank you.
Can I thank Councillor Murphy for that comment or observation? Absolutely. Any opportunity for funding that we've not already explored, I would welcome that. So if you've got any more information on that, please give us the information and we'll look into it. Thank you.
Councillor Hazel Gloucester.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Basically, I just want to know if the highways budget has actually got any money allocated within it for the cleaning of road signage. We're actually getting quite a few complaints over in Shore at the moment regarding numerous regulatory signs and advisory signs around the area being either obscured by foliage. Oh, sorry, Cabinet meeting 24th of June, page 40, section 12. Sorry about that. Yeah, so a lot of the signs are becoming quite difficult to read. Some of that is down to wear and tear, but a lot are also obscured by green moss and lichen. And I just wondered what inspection and cleaning regime is in place for road signage.
Madam Mayor, just point of order on this. Not to devalue Councillor Gloucester's question, I'm sure it's a very pertinent issue in her area, but the minute to which she's referring is around the Highways Capital Improvement Programme, and I suspect that the services to which she's referring would be general maintenance and not covered by this Cabinet minute.
The question still stands. It's about highways, and I'm interested to know if there is a part for cleaning the signage. We're getting a lot of complaints. Well, if the relevant Cabinet member could let me know, I'd really appreciate it, so that we can find out what the maintenance plan is.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As pointed out by the leader, obviously it's not got no connection with the Cabinet minutes in question, but there is an annual maintenance budget to look into schemes like that. So if there, and we do have an annual inspection, but if there are any particular signages that she wants us to look at, if you can just email me those, the locations of those, we'll look into.
I'll send you a list. Thank you.
Councillor Hamblett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my question refers to, thank you, GM Health Care and Board, 31st. No, we're not. No. Okay, shout it off. Look at that. Now.
Are there any more questions on? Do any members who are not Cabinet members wish to ask a question on the Cabinet minutes? Are we done? Lovely. The final part of this section is questions on joint arrangements and partnerships. Please note I will call on the spokesperson that were the council representatives for the 2018-19 and 19-20 municipal years to move the minutes as submitted. GM Health and Care Board, Councillor Fielding.
Move, Madam Mayor.
Greater Manchester Transport Committee, Councillor Hugh Raymond.
Move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Greater Manchester Waste and Recycling Committee, Councillor Hewitt.
Move, Madam Mayor.
My Care Board, Councillor Hussain. I've missed one. You can answer me though.
Move, Madam.
Thank you. National Park Authority, Councillor McLaren. Greater Manchester Combined Authority, Councillor Fielding.
Move, Madam Mayor.
Do any members of the council have a question on the minutes?
That's the time.
Health and Care Board. Was I at this one?
Councillor Hamlet.
Sorry, apologies for the earliness. Must have been a new dicky ticky, you see. Had a valve replacement. Sorry, so it refers to the GM Health and Care Board, 31st of the 5th, 2019, with the board minutes at page 55, bullet point 4, which is the primary care networks and their long-term plan. And I also refer to Trent Road again. It's the surgery regarding the fact that whilst the Clinical Care Commission have actually paused on their decision, will the council use this opportunity to signpost residents so they can join in the nearby Crompton Health Centre, or instead of forcing them to travel the eye-watering approx 40-minute walk from Trent Road to Royton, or the 15-minute cycle, should others allow it, reported in the CCG meeting from Trent Road, as apparently, of course, unless you're a brisk walker, as at the moment it's in accordance to the long-term plan. It's about having sustainable healthcare within the local areas. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Can the relevant member respond to the question submitted?
Could I just ask Councillor Hamblett to identify which minute he's referring to again, please?
It's board minute 2819, page 55, and I refer to bullet point 4.
Right, okay. It's good that Councillor Hamblett has found a minute to hang this question on, but I think the question around Trent Road is perhaps best asked by Councillor Chohan, because it is more of a local issue dealt at our own Health and Care Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Just to make sure I understood your question, are you asking should CCG be signposting those patients to sign up to the surgeries? Is that what your question is?
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. All this council.
So patient got free choice. They can sign up to any surgery. Actually, in 2015, one of the NHS contract condition is that patient can actually sign out of their area. They don't need to be within their practice boundaries. Is advertised all the time on NHS choices through the local directories, and it's essentially the patient's individual choice to sign up to any surgery.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a question on the Greater Manchester Waste and Recycling Committee. Minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of March, page 74 in the Green Book. The minutes state, members noted that 2018-19 year to date position showed that overall diversion rates from landfill continued to increase to over 90%. It was also noted that this increase had been achieved as a result of increased recycling rates, the continued production of refuse-derived fuel, less sent to landfill and reduced overall arisings. Would the member provide reassurances that we're not solving one problem by creating another and chucking contaminants into the atmosphere and creating air pollution issues? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Can relevant Cabinet member respond, please? Relevant member to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Yeah, technology is wonderful these days. The stuff that goes into the furnaces, when it actually comes out, it's very, very pure. Most of the smoke is recycled, very much like one of these clear burn fires that you have in your homes these days. And I think about 95% of the fuel is combusted before it's ejected out. So yes, I can assure you that we're not polluting the atmosphere by heating up these power sites using the furnaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 9, Notice of Administration Business. Come on. The Chief Executive has been notified in writing of a change of the mover and seconder of this motion in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 8.3. Agreement will be signified without discussion. Is Council agreed? I have been notified that the mover on the motion wishes to alter the motion. Is this in agreement with the seconder? The alteration has been circulated to members. Agreement will be signified without discussion. Is Council agreed? I call on Councillor Chauhan to move and Councillor Raymond to second the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm here to talk about Kashmir. Kashmir, just to give you a bit of background, Kashmir lies between two powerful nuclear states, India and Pakistan, and people of Jammu and Kashmir have been demanding their right of self-determination since 1947. This issue led to various wars between India and Pakistan, and I'm sure some of you are thinking why in Oldham Chamber we are discussing Kashmir issue. According to one of the recent estimates, around 15,000 residents of Oldham are of Kashmiri inheritance who have very strong families, family links and ties in Kashmir. Madam Mayor, Kashmiris have been suffering since 1947. But once again, on 4th of August, Kashmir went into lockdown. Mobile TV, internet connections, landlines, all were shut down. School public institutions were shut down. Public meetings were prohibited. All leaders, political leaders, were placed under house arrest. And since then, Kashmir is under complete lockdown. And we now understand that there is a huge shortage of medicine, food, and other basic amenities. Doctors being arrested for speaking up for their patients right outside the hospital, and it's all being shown in international media. This all was done to revoke an article which gives Kashmir some autonomy from Indian Constitution, reminding us that colonial intent did not end in 1947. Mr. Mayor, according to the Indian press, when they were analyzing what impact all these measures since 1947 are having on population, and when they looked at the impact on children, they identified the children are suffering from various mental health issues, starting from anxiety, phobias, eating disorders, and list goes on. And according to the report published by Jammu and Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society, from 1989 to 2003, at least 392 children were killed or forcibly disappeared. And from 2003 to 2017, at least 318 children were killed, and among them 72 girls. Minors are detained by armed forces in Kashmir under a law described by Amnesty International as lawless law. Children been raped, and rape has been used as weapon of war. Schools where children should be studying are used as detention centers, military bases, and interrogation centers. And Save the Children survey in 2012 puts number of orphans in Jammu and Kashmir at 215,000. 215,000. Madam Mayor, Kashmir is unfinished business of our colonial era, and we in United Kingdom are responsible for the dispute in first place. It is also our human responsibility to stop any act of terror against human beings, whether they are state-sponsored or sponsored by individuals or groups. We want to live in a world where rights of individuals, including right of free speech, right of existence, right of equality, and right of economic freedom is respected, and respected as a basic human right. And history tells us that when we stop protecting those human rights, what will happen? We end up Hitler in Germany, we end up Milosevic in Serbia, and history goes on from Algeria to Cambodia. Madam Mayor, we need to take a position. We need to take a position on the promises made to Kashmiris. These promises, these promises are enshrined in 11 United Nations resolutions, and these resolutions are flying into our faces today. These promises include right of self-determination. We should not allow geopolitics, trade interests to color our position and cast aside these resolutions. This is the time for us in this chamber, for us in the United Kingdom, to stand for peace, respect for human rights, respect for international law, and respect for promises made to Kashmiris. This is the time when we stand for over 14 million human beings who are being held hostages in their own homes, in their own land, around 8,000 missing people, over 2,730 unidentified bodies across 38 sites in northern Kashmir, and all those women whose husbands are missing, and they're still waiting for their husband. And one of those women writes, and I quote, she writes, "Whenever there is knock on my door, I feel that it's him," and she has been waiting for 29 years. Madam Mayor, I urge this chamber to support this motion.
Councillor Raymond to second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to second this motion as one of the 15,000 Kashmiri origin people living in the Oldham that Councillor Chauhan has mentioned when moving his resolution. I did have a prepared speech to make to second this motion, but as I was sitting in this meeting, Madam Mayor, I have been sent a press release by the spokesperson of the United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights. And I think I will do more justice to this resolution if I just read out what the United Nations Human Rights Commission's views are regarding the current situation in Kashmir. And it goes into sort of like three basic bullet points. The first one, and I quote, "I am deeply concerned about the impact of recent actions by the Government of India on the human rights of Kashmiris, including restrictions on internet communications and peaceful assembly, and the detention of local political leaders and activists." Number two, I have appealed particularly to India to ease the current lockdown or curfews to ensure people's access to basic services, and that all due process rights are respected for those who have been detained. And the final item is, it is important that the people of Kashmir are consulted and engaged in any decision-making process that have an impact on their future. And Madam Mayor, this is the crux of the matter. Without consulting the people of Kashmir, India has revoked articles from their constitution which gave Kashmiri people the identity that they have enjoyed for over 70 years. As Councillor Chauhan has mentioned, 70 years ago, the United Nations promised the Kashmiri people, with the governments of Pakistan and both India, that they will be given a right for self-determination so they can decide for themselves their future. Unfortunately, Madam Mayor, those resolutions, and there's a number of them passed by the United Nations, the United Nations is silent. Those resolutions have not been enacted, and the Kashmiris have been suffering brutality for the last 7 decades. It's about time the waking up the world's conscience is imperative to prevent the Indian forces from effecting a total siege while the supplies of food, medicine and other necessities of life are withheld. Now the question begs, Madam Mayor, why do we need to debate this in this chamber? Apart from the 15,000 odd Kashmiris living in Oldham, there has been other individuals who are interested with human rights or organisations from Oldham who attended a solidarity with Kashmir last Saturday at the town centre. And let me name some of them: the Saddleworth Peace Movement, the Oldham Peace and Justice, the Oldham Interfaith Forum, Reverend Derek Palmer from the Oldham Parish Church, the Free Kashmir Group Oldham, and also our members of Parliament, both Debbie Abraham and Jim McMahon were present. So the plea for the Kashmiris goes beyond the people who have connections with that region. It's a human rights plea, Madam Mayor, and the plea is simple, and the plea is to our government to act to save the lives of the Kashmiri people before it's too late, and it's to act and put human rights before any business or financial interests that we might have, and also asking our government to use its position on the United Nations Security Council to grant the Kashmiris their right of self-determination. And in essence, Madam Mayor, that's what this resolution is asking for, and it would be remiss of me at this point not to recognise and thank our both borough MPs, Debbie Abraham, who chairs the all-parliamentary group on Kashmir in the House of Parliament, and Jim McMahon, who's also a member of that group, who have been advocates of the Kashmiri people and who have been fighting relentlessly for the cause of the Kashmiri people. And I think we in this chamber owe it to them, and we owe it to the Kashmiri people. So I urge every member of this council to please support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Does any member wish to speak on the motion? Councillor Mushtaq.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This, as the motion states, is an issue of great concern. The revocation of Article 370 and 35A are in themselves greatly concerning, as it provides an insight into the change in attitude of the Indian government. These steps and the subsequent decisions to consciously remove the human rights of the people of Kashmir are a brazen message to the international community, including the United Kingdom, that the nationalist far-right Modi government is now willing to enact the dark desires it has held since coming to power, and desires, I believe, Modi has harboured long before coming to power. Madam Mayor, I have family in Azad Kashmir, that is the Pakistan-administered part of the region. I was there in February visiting my grandparents and extended family. I've been there in the past whilst cross-border shelling has been ongoing, and I've heard the shelling with my own ears. People watching or listening may think that I will be biased because of such links to the Pakistan-administered Azad Kashmir. Madam Mayor, there is no such bias here, because this isn't a Pakistan-India issue. This isn't a Muslim-Hindu issue. This is purely a human rights abuse issue and a potential modern-day genocide. I don't make this claim lightly, Madam Mayor. Last year, I was in Bosnia, visiting Sarajevo and Srebrenica, the site of a genocide post the Second World War in Europe. I spoke to survivors of the genocide and to family members of survivors. Madam Mayor, the day the Bosnian Serb soldiers descended the hill into the village to begin the genocide, there was an expectation, based on information that had been received, that that morning there'd be air support from the UN. The innocent civilians were expecting it, and the barbarian soldiers were expecting it. That is what was holding them back. When that air support didn't arrive, it was effectively a green light for Ratko Mladic and the men under his command to advance and begin their massacre. They isolated the Bosniak Muslims from the world. They separated the boys and men from the women. They prevented anyone from outside from entering. They brought in all the troops. They reassured everyone that they wouldn't be hurt, and with the international community standing by and watching, they massacred over 8,000 boys and men. Madam Mayor, the Indian government, through the blackout of internet and media, has isolated the people of Kashmir. They are entering homes in the middle of the night, taking boys aged 10 and over, separating them from the women. They have increased the number of troops to around 1 million, making it the most militarized zone in the world. The Indian government has arrested and detained prominent politicians of the region, and the Indian government is assuring everyone that it will be fine. Madam Mayor, Modi is doing everything Ratko Mladic did just before he carried out genocide. This is why everyone in this chamber and everyone watching or listening needs to take some form of action. We have cross-party councillors in the chamber, and I urge you all to write to Boris Johnson and Dominic Raab as Foreign Secretary to intervene at the very least. Madam Mayor, that fateful day in Bosnia, the absence of the air support was the green light for Mladic and his men. Let not our silence as a borough and as a nation be the green light for this nationalist, far-right Modi government. Please all speak up, take action and support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a British Kashmiri, it disappoints me that 70 years on we're still talking about this particular issue. At the beginning of the meeting today, Madam Mayor, as the chaplain said, today is a significant day, 11th of September, and our thoughts are with families and friends of all that passed away on that dreadful day. Today, what is going on in Kashmir is no different to what happened in America on the 11th of September. Terrorists terrorizing innocent individuals and families. That terrorism was carried out by individuals, but in Kashmir, as it's outlined already, it's state terrorism to its highest level. This terrorism is led by the Indian state, who's led by the fascist Modi. Obviously, people have mentioned already in terms of human rights violations, no food, no medicine, etc. And obviously, previous speakers have mentioned the fact that rape is used as a weapon against women on a daily basis, and people are being imprisoned within their own homes. Madam Mayor, I want to share with you in terms of my own personal experience on this particular issue. I'm trying to sort of control my emotions, but as a family, in the previous conflicts, we've lost 3 family members. 1 as army personnel and 2 as civilians. The 2 of them were actually married. 1 had 5 children, the other had 3 young children under 12. My paternal uncle, who's the youngest of his siblings, was actually died as a martyr in his village when in one of the conflicts in 1965. In 2000, I was on holiday in Kashmir, and a mile away from our home, 15 young men were actually blown up within our own sort of town centre. And all those young sort of men were actually doing was just going about their daily life, and it was a bomb blast carried out by a terrorist. At the moment, in our family house in Azad Kashmir, currently we have a refugee family living there now. We had to move from the border between Azad Kashmir and Jammu Kashmir because their 12-year-old son was shot and he had to have his leg amputated. The cross-border sort of shelling and shooting is going on a daily basis, and families on both sides of the border are unsafe within their own family homes. And I urge this council to support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Mayor, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I can't speak with the passion of some of the people who've already spoken due to their direct connections. I can say, on behalf of my colleagues here, we do agree with the members opposite, and the very rapid decision by the Indian state to strip Indian Kashmir and its regions of its special autonomous status is worrying and violates many human rights laws. And anything that plays to a nationalist or far-right agenda, as it does in India, is not good enough and needs to be challenged And we've seen evidence elsewhere within Europe and on other continents when it's not challenged, what happens. And what's really sad about this is India is the largest democracy in the world, and it is behaving like a tin pot dictator in terms of how it is treating this annexed region of Kashmir. Turning off the internet, stopping communication, stopping people talking together, stopping people gathering together. It has a very familiar ring from somewhere on the other side of the world that ended in a tragedy not too recently. This borough, we're committed to the United Nations Development Goals, and councillors and members of Parliament must put on a united effort to restore peace in tormented Kashmir, and I use the word deliberately. We must, across the world, uphold the liberal principle of self-determination. We need to acknowledge communities wherever they reside and allow them, if need be, to rule themselves. Mass protests, peaceful mass protests, have turned into violent battles of civilians versus the police. And that's always terrifying, and must be terrifying for people and their families who live there. In this borough, as we've heard, where many residents have family and friends who live in Kashmir, we must speak up for minorities everywhere that have their rights removed. And for the sake of every Hindu, Muslim, Christian and those of other faiths or no faith in India or Pakistan, politicians must push for a peaceful solution and allow a democratic outcome and a peaceful one. Kashmir is an area of the planet with a very turbulent history, as we've heard, caused by hastily drawn borders when India was partitioned at independence by the then Labour government in 1947. The least we can do from our position in the United Kingdom, as long as we still are a United Kingdom, as is international promoters of peace and freedom of speech, is to advocate a calm and orderly democratic solution. The people who live in that part of the world deserve nothing better, and their families and relatives that live here deserve nothing more than our support to do that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Does Councillor Chauhan wish to reply?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Just to say thank you to Councillor Akhtar for sharing his personal story, but that is the story of almost every single Kashmiri residing in Kashmir or maybe outside Kashmir. I absolutely agree with Councillor Mushtaq. It's not about Hindu, Muslim, Sikh. It is about that nationalist ideology, that right-wing ideology, which is very similar to the Nazis ideology. And we know the consequences when it was not stopped. So whenever it happens, wherever it happens, whether it's Cambodia, whether it's Oldham, whether it's Kashmir, we should stand up to that. Thank you very much to Councillor Teague for sharing the latest information, and thank you to Councillor Sykes. I'm not thanking you for the Labour comment, but thank you for supporting. Thank you for supporting resolution. I'm sure it's appreciated. It is appreciated by over 15,000 residents in Oldham, but I'm sure our message will be heard as well. And as I said, this is our basic human responsibility to stand up with people wherever they're suffering. So thank you.
Thank you. Does Council agree the motion? All those in favour? Abstentions? No. The motion is carried. For the second motion. Oh. Right, for motion 2, unfortunately we only have 8 minutes left. I call on Councillor Jabbar to move and Councillor Hume to second the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'll try to be brief and get to the point rather than deliver the written speech. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. That was the opening comment, Madam Mayor, the report that's mentioned in this motion, which was valuing Oldham's urban forest report. which was undertaken by iTree Eco Project. Madam Mayor, the report tells us the beneficial impact of having trees in our borough and how it is important to our ecosystem. And it also provides a baseline of the things that we need to do to grow the urban forest that we have in Oldham. I'm cutting out a lot of the speeches, Madam Mayor, given the shortness of time. We know, Madam Mayor, that everyone likes to spend time in the woodland and the beneficial impact that it has on human being of relaxing and de-stressing. Everybody knows that. What we've also seen recently is that GPs are prescribing forest bathing, a concept that's from Japan, which basically means that people spend time in the forest actually is helping their health and well-being. So we know trees have a massive impact on people's health. But apart from the health benefit to human beings, trees play a massive part in tackling the impact of climate change. So if you actually look how it helps to deal with the carbon and store carbon, it is quite significant. And what I wanted to do today, given the shortness of the time, is just focus on just a single tree and how it's benefiting the environment, but thereby then benefiting us as human beings. So a tree can absorb as much as 22 kilograms of carbon dioxide per year and sequester 1 ton of carbon dioxide by the time it reaches 40 years old. A hectare of well-managed woodland can sequester 2.6 ton of carbon each year. A tree can remove 13.9 kilogram of air pollution harmful to particulates matter per year. A tree can reduce surface water runoff by half cubic meter each year, which equates to 500 litres a year. So that's just a single tree, Madam Mayor. If we can, the reason why I pulled off that statistics is often when we talk about 500,000 trees and the borough urban forest, people seem to struggle to engage. But when you look at the figures for one single tree, then I hope people can engage on that and actually then think how they can help in taking forward this agenda that we've got. So in the report also mentions the Northern Forest Project. And I'm hoping, Madam Mayor, this will give us the opportunity to secure additional funding, which will enable us to plant more trees in the borough. And as I've said before in this chamber, one of the ambitions that we have long term is to make Oldham the greenest borough in the whole of GM. I hope, Madam Mayor, that everyone can sign up to this project and actually do their bit to plant trees wherever they can. And I move the motion as printed. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Jabbar, for bringing this important motion, which I'm pleased to second. I'll cut my speech as well, and I know you've spoken about one tree, and I'm going to speak about the Northern Reach project, which is 50 million trees, which is a really ambitious project, and I think we will feel real benefits from the project. These trees will reduce the risk of flooding to over 190,000 people, store thousands of tonnes of carbon, and absorb up to 7.5 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. This project will also have a positive financial impact, which I know you'll like, and help create thousands of jobs. And, but as we know, it's not just, trees are an important issue globally, and in the Amazon this summer, nearly 1 million hectares of rainforest have been lost thanks to the environmental vandalism of the fascist Jair Bolsonaro and his rolling back of policies that put in place protection on one of the most biodiverse parts of our planet. And I think as councillors, we must do everything we can to make sure we educate people on the importance of trees in combating the disaster that is climate change. And I would urge everyone here to sign up to the Charter of Woods, Trees and People. And at the last meeting, I'd also like to say Councillor Jabbar brought forward a really important report detailing the fantastic work we're doing as an Oldham Council, which is talked about there, trying to make us the greenest council in Greater Manchester. I urge my fellow members to support this motion. Trees play a vital role in Oldham, and the opportunities of the Northern Forest are huge ones that we must grasp. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the motion? Okay, can you make it brief? 2 minutes.
Yeah, just really quick. Just to say that DEFRA's Northern Forest Partnership Innovation Fund opens again on October 7th. So for any of our landowners in Oldham, if they're willing to plant trees in the borough and they've got more than 3 hectares, the government will match fund their planting.
Councillor Jabbar, do you wish to reply? Councillor Murphy. You don't want to, no. Councillor Jabbar, do you wish to reply?
Just briefly, Madam Mayor, I'm sure everyone in the chamber will support this. This is a really good motion. Thank you very much.
Does Council agree the motion? Those in favour? I think that's all. Those against? The motion is carried. Notice of opposition business. Motion 1. I call on Councillor Hartness to move and Councillor Murphy to second the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That brings us nicely on to climate change. And I would have spoke on the last motion if we'd had time. And I'm glad that Councillor Jabbar brought that to the Council. And also the climate change paper from last time as well. On the trees, it is something that my group leader had put forward to the council leader about, and obviously in the past I proposed a motion regarding tree warden and stuff, and I think you know, the fact obviously we've all got our plastic bottles now, our refillable bottles, or refillable cups, other brands available of course, and I think, you know, it's showing a very positive direction that this council is taking regarding climate change and how important it is. We've seen over the last 12 months some of the biggest fires in living memory across Saddleworth and Yorkshire. Scenes reminiscent of apocalyptic films have been unfolded. Without action, scientists have warned of more Saddleworth Moor style fires. The rainforest fires in South America, some of the real buffers against climate change, are a worrying sign of the direction we are taking. Following discussions with local councillors over a period of time, I'm pleased there will be investment in Delft on flood aviation work. Without action, though, on climate change, flooding is going to become a much bigger problem. We cannot ignore the fact that the weather events are more frequent and extreme than before. Now, the BBC have always had to take both sides of an argument to maintain balance. However, in the cases of climate change, this is not the case, as the evidence is so overwhelming. With the Lib Dems, when the Lib Dems were in government, we introduced the world's first green investment bank and higher investment on renewable energies and introduction of plastic bag charges. Being green and building a green economy. It has been, if this had continued, hydro projects such as the one in Dovestone could have been more widespread. Since then, in this country, I believe, the eye has been taken off the ball by the government. Climate change is going to have a bigger place on syllabuses in schools. This is becoming evident when young people have recently taken strikes from schools to protest about climate change. This shows that this government is not doing enough to tackle the issue. We cannot wait, and as elected members, we have a duty to act to ensure that this planet is still sustainable and suitable for the next generation when we depart. The government is currently doing natural disaster style planning for the possibility of a no-deal Brexit. It will be a disaster, but climate change is the biggest disaster that is going to occur. Like Brexit, these problems are man-made. We can change direction. Some good work is being done locally already, such as the Greater Manchester Council's creating the Environment Plan and the ambition to be carbon neutral by 2038. The Deputy Leader's commitments, of course, in July and to the climate shows that the leadership are committed to being environmentally aware and taking action. Saddleworth Parish Council have already committed to being to the ambition of being carbon neutral. I'm also very pleased to see friends Chris Davis back as an MEP, along with Jane Brophy, who are doing great work in Europe to move the climate change agenda forward, showing working together on climate change as a bloc is more productive than isolationism. This motion proposes that we have a cross-party climate change strategy group, sign the pledge to commit to consuming energy from renewable sources. We should declare a climate change emergency and work collaboratively across sectors as part of our strategy. We should seek to support and get resources from government to achieve our ambitions. The more councils that take this approach, the bigger impact they will be having. We will have by taking wider action to green ourselves, to create an economy which is decarbonised and to have an internationalist approach too. As a council, we should do our bit, be bold and become carbon neutral as soon as possible. Please support the motion. We will support the amendment too. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to second this motion. The Liberal Democrats are passionate about environmental issues and issues that affect our planet. I recently brought a motion about plastics, and a very serious issue. We've even got a satellite party called the Green Liberal Democrats who champion environmental issues. But I like facts because they help put things into perspective, so I'm just going to tell you about some that I've come across on my travels that help support this motion. Excuse me. There are 5 massive patches of plastic in the oceans around the world. These huge concentrations of plastic debris cover large swathes of the ocean. The one between California and Hawaii is the size of the state of Texas. And I understand there's one the size of France. And the amount of plastics in the oceans is set to increase tenfold by 2020. Another thing that you may or may not know about, but if anybody's ever had a tyre fitted to your car, there's a small charge on the bottom of your bill for waste tyre disposal. Now you might think that's to dispose of tyres in an environmentally friendly way. Survey says no. EU law prevents us from disposing of tyres to landfill. So in our infinite wisdom, what do we do with our 500,000 disused tyres of the 40 million waste tyres we produce? We ship them abroad. Generally, they go to the Middle East and Asia. In fact, there are over 7 million tyres filling one Kuwaiti landfill. The site is so vast that the tyre graveyard is now visible from space. In my capacity as Shadow Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services, I've asked engineers about trialling rubber and plastic roads made from waste products, and I hope they seriously look at implementing the idea, and I hope that I have the backing of my opposite number. So calling for the Council to declare a climate change emergency just don't quite cut it. It doesn't seem serious enough, but it genuinely is that serious. We've taken the mickey out of our planet for long enough and we're not respecting it. We want Oldham to play its part and become environmentally minded, and for everyone to take action. This is a serious matter that concerns everybody regardless of your political opinion, and I'd ask Council to support the motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Jabbar to move and Councillor Judd to second the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm rising to move the amendment as you just outlined. The amendment is designed to strengthen the motion put forward by colleagues on the other side, and nothing else. I'm very pleased that the Lib Dems take this issue extremely seriously, and as Dave Murphy said, they have brought motion to this chamber to be debated and agreed previously, and I thank them for the support they give us on this particular issue. So in terms of the amendment, Madam Mayor, the reason why we put it forward is a lot of the things they're saying when you declare climate change emergency is actually covered by the report that I brought to the last committee. So it demonstrates what we've been doing, but also sets out what we're going to be doing going forward in terms of deal with this very important issue. So for example, if you look the refurbishment of this hall and the ceiling, example that we're using LED lights, it's just practical things that the council is doing to implement a plan that will help us to protect against the climate change. I think when Councillor Harkness was speaking, he was talking about cross-party group. We did have that, and we will start it again. And anybody who's interested, if you can please, through your party leaders, let us know your interest, then we will set that up as soon as possible. And just a plea to everyone in this chamber that if you've got any idea that you think will help to deal with this issue, please please send it either through your own representative or to me. We're really keen to find out what thoughts that people have got. In terms of climate change climate change emergency, look, the real issue is that last council meeting I spoke about the Oldham Council becoming carbon neutral by 2025. We could bring forward that date a lot sooner if the government was to give us some incentive or reinstate the incentive that was there before. So, Madam Mayor, you'll recall that there's something called feed-in tariff, which was an incentive for people to install solar farms and wind turbines. The government took that away by claiming they're going to be the greenest government ever, but then at the same time took this away. If they were to reinstate that, the Oldham Council could become carbon neutral a lot sooner. I would say within a couple of years. Why? Because we've got plans to actually install solar panels and create solar farms, but at the moment these are not viable financially without a subsidy. So when you say that we call on the government for additional resources, I'm completely supporting that. I've said this previously in this chamber as well, Madam Mayor. So this is a key thing. But I'm really pleased that we seem to be taking this issue forward together. And I hope when we start the cross-party group on this issue, that there will be other new ideas coming forward and we'll be able to implement some of the things quicker than we plan to do. So I move the amendment, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Judd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to second the amendment. As Councillor Jabbar said, we're quite happy to declare a climate emergency, and this amendment seeks to strengthen that motion, but as well as it just has a few changes around technicalities, as well as acknowledging that the debate's moved on past just acknowledging a climate emergency and that people want to see real action. And you would have heard at the last council meeting that we are taking action and will continue to do so. And as Councillor Jabbar said, we welcome any suggestions from other people as well about what we can do as a borough to make a difference and help the planet. But we know not everyone will take action. We've seen in the press this week that the Freight Transport Association aren't happy with the clean air plans. I expect other big business to not to be happy with some of the changes. But we wouldn't be discussing this today if it wasn't for the actions of young people speaking up and demanding action. And I'll suggest that they will continue to demand action, and they have a strike next week on the 20th, which I hope many of our members will be supporting. So I thank the members opposite for bringing the motion, and I hope they accept our amendment.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Does Councillor Hartness wish to reply?
No, we'll accept the amendment.
Councillor Jabbar, do you wish to reply?
No, thanks, Madam Mayor.
Does Council agree the amendment? Those in favour? Everybody. Those against? Any abstentions? The amendment is carried. Does any member wish to speak on the motion as amended? No, yay. Sorry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try and keep it brief. This climate emergency is a vicious cycle, and it's not just something that we are affecting from the borough to outside. It is something that affects every person in this borough, and it affects every decision that this council takes. It's a vicious cycle that will only increase unless we do something about it, and that's going to affect every aspect of our lives. Now, figures show that 88% of the deaths worldwide caused by climate change are children. So it's not just the children that, of today that are going to be affected down the line. They're the people being most affected today. This year, the figures are 64,000 deaths in the UK caused by climate change. That's just deaths. That's not ill health. So you see the vast majority of those being children. And that is going to have an effect on what we are spending on healthcare in the borough, what we are spending on education in the borough, and the impact on how well they deliver a borough that is worth living in. So if we have to spend more money on education, on healthcare, then that's more money we can't spend on affecting and reducing climate change. It becomes a vicious cycle that engages us again and again. The chances of increased heat waves, the chances are that the heat wave that happened last summer, which was a once-in-a-lifetime event, will happen every other year. And that causes problems on the trains. The railways were affected massively last year. There were delays to flights, so suddenly you're increasing emissions from those flights and emissions from those trains as they take longer to get everywhere. And people are unable to get to work. People have less of an economic impact. So again, people in this borough are affected by this so much. And then if they can't work, they make less profits, they pay less tax. And that tax is not raised to combat the climate change. In every aspect of what we're doing, we are causing the climate change and being affected by the climate change. If again, this is flooding, we see in every one of our wards the effects of flooding, and that is only increasing every single time, and we will have to spend more money on addressing this flooding. And our boroughs and our borough and our wards will be the poorer for it. And then again, that is less money that we can affect real change with. It's taken up by addressing something that we need to stop now. The more this goes on, the worse it gets, the less we can impact it. So it has to stop now. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does Councillor Hartness wish to reply?
Very quickly, Sam, yeah, vicious cycle, exactly right. I think Councillor Jabbar's comments on the solar farms and so on is dead right. You know, we should be looking at every single new house we build, it being green, and making sure that through planning applications and all that sort of thing, that should be happening. But without subsidies, those things aren't going to happen. So we do need to challenge the government on that, and we do need to look at what happens when we build new things and making sure that they're green. And, you know, obviously Sam summed up pretty much everything why this is so important just then. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Council agree the motion as amended? Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? The motion as amended is carried. I call on Councillor Williams to move and Councillor Gloucester to second the second motion. I apologise.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since 1970... Oh, it's me moving it. Oh, sorry, I'm wrong, sorry.
There you go.
No, you just...
I'll give you a shadow for that. Right. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I raise the notice of motion, but can I request a change in the NSPCC full spelling out? It should be National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, not as printed in the Green Book, so thank you. What do all these have in common? Drama teacher, coach driver, gymnastics coach, swimming coach, faith group leader, football coach, cadet leader, youth club leader, dance instructor. They are all excluded from the 2003 Act, Abuse of Position of Trust, Sexual Offences. Before I start, I want to make it clear that thankfully it's only a small minority of these people who exploit this loophole, and I want to thank the good guys who teach our kids swimming, dancing and all sorts of things. It is perfectly legal at present for the people mentioned above to incite a child to engage in sexual activity. The people are in a position of power, like those I mentioned, can take advantage of these young people without persecution. Let's be realistic here. From a very young age, boys and girls see these coaches and instructors as someone who is helping them to achieve things. Sometimes their goals and dreams are dependent on them being at their best, and it has been known that the adults over 18s take advantage of the young person's adoration. The young people want to please their swimming instructor, coach or football coach or any of the others that are exempt at the moment. In January, over 3,500 NSPCC campaigners emailed their MPs asking them to help close the loophole. The Ministry of Justice is now conducting a review into this law. Thanks to some amazing campaigners for helping them reach this breakthrough in the campaign, but it's not over yet. They need to ensure that no child is left unprotected by professionals in a position of trust and make sure that this law is changed. That is why we have asked the Chief Executive to write to our 3 MPs seeking their support for this. Sex offences committed by adults in positions of trust have increased by more than 80% since 2014. The number of professionals such as teachers, care staff and youth justice workers sexually exploiting 16 and 17-year-olds rose to 290 in the year up to June, up from 159 3 years ago. That's 290 too many. In total, nearly 1,000 crimes have been recorded since 2014. As the NSPCC say, every child is worth fighting for. And this campaign, if the government accepts it, should hopefully reduce the number of crimes recorded. We mustn't forget that parents send their children and young people to these after-school clubs and expect them to be safe and not be wondering if the person running the activity is a sexual predator, because when all's said and done, that is exactly what they are. This is not a recent thing. We have heard about the Premier League football coaches who have abused their positions. A number of ex-footballers have come forward to say they suffered sexual abuse as children at the hands of their coaches. Those who have bravely spoken publicly include Andy Woodward, Chris Unsworth, Jason Dunford and Stephen Walters. We have heard of the trauma that it has caused them. They have also been vilified by members of the accused family, saying they participated fully knowing what they were doing. Do we want that for our young people? Finally, I would like to finish by reading Hannah's story, not her real name. Hannah swam from a young age and took training seriously. She admired her coach Brian and would work hard to be given praise by him. When she was 15, thank you.
Read.
When she was 15, Hannah was having a difficult time, and Brian built her trust by supporting her. This is Hannah speaking, after I turned 16, he started commenting on my appearance, which he hadn't done before. He'd say I look nice, or that clothes look nice on me. He'd say I look beautiful and attractive. I'd not really heard a man say those kinds of things about me before, so it felt very new. I wasn't sure how I felt about it at that time. Things progressed to the point where they started having sex. The relationship lasted over a year before a disclosure revealed what had been happening. The police questioned Brian, but no charges were brought due to Hannah being over 16. I urge you to support this motion, and so we can protect people like Hannah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The acronym NSPCC really goes without saying. Most people know what it stands for, and as the name says, it does what it says on the tin. However, child abuse is in many forms, be that physical, emotional, sexual or just neglect. The NSPCC need help to deliver the principles for which they stand for, and the vast array of areas that child abuse means that they have plenty of work to do. Identifying and supporting vulnerable members of our society, if only their vulnerability is by reason of their immature years. Over recent years, the Sexual Offences Act has been tightened up to safeguard areas that a few years ago were not thought problematic, were hidden from view so the majority of us didn't know about it, or because a lack of knowledge of it did not come to the forefront. Several cases have been highlighted that have led the way, really, so that things are investigated, or have also identified that there needs to be changes in the law that are required. I'll name just a few that will ring a bell with you. Gary Glitter, Jimmy Saville and Barry Burnell. The NSPCC have identified other positions of trust that are currently excluded from the legislative list of groups who they feel should be included. So if we look at the three individuals I've just mentioned, the proposed groups would only apply to the football coach. The pop star and the TV star could still act with impunity should the child be 16 or 17 and consenting. We therefore call for all people in a position of power to be covered by this legislation. The Closing the Loophole campaign of the NSPCC goes a long way to making this conduct illegal. Oldham Borough is sadly not exempt from child protection issues, and we should be at the forefront of ensuring child protection is a key priority, and where we can influence legislation to further protect some of our most vulnerable people, we must do so. I would ask that you support this motion.
Does any member wish to speak on the motion? We only have 4 minutes left. Yeah, Councillor Cheriton.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate there's only 4 minutes left, but this is a really important motion. The view of position of trust is a very, very narrow view in the legal sense, because how is a sports worker, a youth worker or a faith worker not in a position of trust over those children and young people? You've referenced the likes of Barry Burnell, but you could look at Larry Nasser and the gymnastic coach. And things like selection around sports coaches, they are absolutely in a position of trust that often deal with these children from a very young age.
If you look at sports coaches, between 2016 and 18, 80 sports coaches in this country were convicted of child sex abuse. So they might be in the minority, but that's 80 people too many that have been convicted for child sex abuse in relation to sports coaches. And it's laws like this that essentially allowed them to hide in plain sight, as it was with Jimmy Savile et al. As lead member, as you can imagine, I'm privy to quite a lot of sensitive and unpalatable information that comes forward, and some information that keeps me awake at night about how adults think it's appropriate to behave towards children and young people. I'd welcome any change in the law that makes our children and young people safer, and I'd welcome this change in the law to remove what I believe is to be a grey area, because it's behind these grey areas that child abusers hide. Thank you, Mrs Mayor.
Councillor Shah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, but thank you to Councillor Williamson for this incredibly important motion. I think it serves us as a reminder as we approach tonight's agenda that we have no bigger duty or responsibility than the safety and protection of our citizens. It's a responsibility that we take incredibly seriously. I fully support the NSPCC's campaign to extend the position of trust law to include all roles where an adult holds a position of power over 16 and 17-year-olds, while making it illegal for any adult to have any kind of sexual activity with a young person under the age of 18 in their care. The Council works closely in partnership with the police, health services, schools and many other partners to safeguard children and vulnerable adults. Everyone across our community has a role to play when it comes to safeguarding, particularly when it comes to reporting those concerns. I'm aware that there are allegations currently circulating on social media. All concerns that we become aware of are looked at as a matter of course by the multi-agency safeguarding hub that spans across our partnership groups. If any member of our community has concerns about the safety of an individual or individuals, then I think, Madam Mayor, the responsible thing would be to talk to those agencies and to do that directly instead of spreading malicious gossip and circulate allegations, rumours and opinion on social media. If those rumours or then reports are reported directly, it gives us room to properly investigate rather than any of the scaremongering, because there might be some victims out there. And once we start falling into the scaremongering of the rumours and don't report in a proper way, it's really reckless of us, because it will then put off people who actually need to do the reporting to actually report, thinking that their case might not be heard or investigated properly. So my plea tonight would be that if there's anything of that sort, you report it directly in a responsible way and avoid social media. Thank you.
Thank you. We're out of time. Yeah. Councillor Williamson, right to reply?
I do welcome the fact that the administration support this. This is a really important issue because so many young children grow up with these people for many, many years, and they're bestowed affection and stuff like that, and they think it's fine, and then when it gets to that stage where they still think it's fine, that's when these people strike, and it is absolutely wrong, and we should make sure that this law is changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Council agree the motion? Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? The motion is carried. We're out of time on motion 3. Does the council want to go straight to the vote?
Sorry. Can I move it to overview and scrutiny, please?
Second.
It's got to be moved and seconded.
Go on then.
I'll move, thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'll second, Madam Mayor.
Can I move it now, please?
Does council agree? Yeah. Item 11, update on actions from Council. I call on Councillor Fielding to move and Councillor Sykes to second the report.
Move, Madam Mayor.
Does any member wish to speak? Does Council agree the recommendation as detailed within the report? Item 12, Brexit update. I call on Councillor Fielding to move and Councillor Sykes to second the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to move the report detailing the preparation work underway at this Council regarding the potential for a no-deal Brexit. As most people will know, I'm not one of the 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit. I am one of the 29.1 million people who were eligible to vote in that referendum who did not vote for the Leave option. Being in that position, I could stand up here and be smug and gloat and talk about how all of the things that we were told would happen if Britain voted to leave, the harm to the economy, the damage to our nation's standing in the world, the threat to the fragile peace process in Northern Ireland, have now indeed played out as predicted. But in the position of responsibility that I'm privileged to hold here, that would not be very classy. This report, which I rise to move tonight, makes very sobering reading indeed. And I think, given that this is the last meeting of all councillors before a potential no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October, the most sensible and appropriate thing for me to do is to simply talk us through it. You will see on page 2 that a project group has been established within the Council to work on the implications of a potential no-deal scenario and how to manage them. So on page 2, here is one local example of how Brexit is a draw on already stretched council resources by requiring officers to dedicate time to planning for Brexit that could be spent doing their jobs in their respective departments of finance, policy, public protection, and most importantly, adult and child safeguarding. Page 3 contains details of the finances which the government has made available to councils to support preparation for our exit from the EU. In total, this comes to tens of millions of pounds across the country, of which £210,000 has been allocated to Oldham over 2 years. Here again is an example of millions of pounds worth of money that could otherwise be used to equip schools with the materials that they need, build hospitals, provide care for the elderly, instead being spent on Brexit. And whilst £210,000 is a nice sum of money to an ordinary Oldham individual or household, in the context of a multi-million-pound organisation with far-reaching responsibilities, particularly to vulnerable people, it is not clear what this relatively small amount is expected to be spent on. You will note, however, that £20,000 has been allocated to support Oldham's emergency food provision sector or food banks. We are providing funding to food banks to buy additional food because the anticipation is that as generous Oldham households who donate foodstuffs to food banks come under more pressure because of the economic fallout of Brexit, they will make fewer donations to food banks. Page 3 of the report continues with detail about the anticipated economic impact of Brexit. And the GMCA, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, have calculated that a no-deal Brexit, because that's the only scenario for which we have details, remember, and which we can make predictions. We don't know what else might happen. We don't know what kind of deal might come out of the negotiations that are allegedly taking place. We don't know whether Theresa May's deal will come back or something else. The only thing that we have any certainty over as a possible outcome is no deal, and so that's what we're preparing for. But the GMCA have calculated that a no-deal Brexit will result in a depression in growth for many years to come. A depression in growth means lower tax revenues and less money to spend on public services. Moving to page 4, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation have found that those in poverty are most likely to be affected by loss of European Union grant funding, which has over the years been targeted at areas where high concentrations of people living in poverty live, like the northwest of England, like Oldham. And if we really think that the Conservative Shared Prosperity Fund will be targeted to places like Oldham when we do leave the EU, then I think that that is sadly misguided. Can someone move an extension? This European funding is funding that could create jobs, redevelopment projects, and stimulate and help people out of poverty and into work. This could be gone. Thankfully, however, the government have confirmed that the EU settlement scheme would continue, enabling EU citizens and their family members living in the UK, many of whom work supporting vital public services, will be able to secure their status and remain in the UK. So perhaps a drop of good news in this report. There are concerns expressed on page 5 about community cohesion, and whilst the report is light on detail in this section, there are genuine concerns about the effect on community cohesion of no deal, not least because in the year after the EU membership referendum, hate crimes are recorded to have increased by 29%. Page 5 continues with details of concerns about the impact on the food supply chain and availability of fresh food, because of delays anticipated at the border with the requirement for border checks, during which time food could rot. And there is evidence that food on British farms is already rotting in the fields because of the shortage of labour available to pick it. This is why the government has said that they will allow schools to interpret the food menu standards flexibly, meaning that Brexit could mean our children will be fed lower quality food just in time for Christmas. Finally, on pages 5 and 6, there is reference to the concerns raised in the national media around the potential disruption to the supply of fuel. A shortage of fuel could mean no fuel in the cars of the home care workers who travel to some of the remotest parts of the borough to provide care for the elderly and vulnerable, or a shortage of fuel for our public transport infrastructure and even for ambulances. Those who dismiss these concerns as alarmist or project fear should look to the article in the Sun newspaper from 3 days ago, where it was reported that Michael Gove has 1,600 troops on standby to keep fuel flowing in case of no deal. Now, even if you dismiss all that as project fear, even if you think, I've got enough money, I don't have to rely on a food bank, so I'll be all right. If you think, I'm a white person that speaks with a British accent, so I don't have to be worried about being a victim of a hate crime. If you think I don't have children that go to school and eat school meals, and you don't care whether the quality of food in children's meals is lower. The fact is that today, families are £400 worse off than they were before the Brexit referendum. And that is because of the collapse in the value of the pound. For those frequent travellers, oh, you're going to cut me off. I was getting into it then.
Does council want to extend?
Those frequent travellers to European countries and users of the euro will know that back in 2016, your pound bought €1.42. Today, it buys €1.12. That means that your pints in Benidorm are much more expensive than they were just a few years ago. And whilst there's lots to be angry about in what I've spoken about there, what people should be angry about is that we simply don't know where we're going to be. Lots of this is based on the assumption that the outcome will be a no-deal Brexit, because there is no other detail forthcoming from the government as to what the alternative outcomes might be. And of course, Boris Johnson has shut Parliament down. So it looks like we're not going to find out before the potential no-deal exit day of the 31st of October. I would be angry that Andrea Leadsom was on television today saying that she didn't want to release the Operation Yellowhammer reports, which provided details of how a no-deal Brexit might affect people, because they might alarm and upset people. If they're that bad, we need to know. We need to know so we can prepare. But one of the most sobering things that I watched earlier today was an excellent series by John Harris, a journalist for The Guardian, who travels around the country and vox pops people in the street in various parts of England and Wales, and in various parts of the United Kingdom. And he was most recently in Wigan just a few days ago. But in deep Tory blue Macclesfield, which is where he lives and where he went vox-popping protesters who were out protesting at the proroguing of Parliament, he came across an elderly gentleman who had his placard. This is in deep Tory blue Macclesfield. Gentleman protesting against Boris Johnson's action, holding up his placard, and he was shaking. And the reason he was shaking was not because he was furious. He was shaking because he had Parkinson's disease. And John Harris says to this gentleman, "What do you think about all of this?" And he said, "I am terrified. I rely on medication for my Parkinson's disease, and my GP is not able to advise me whether that medication will still be available, freely available, at the time that I need it beyond October the 31st. No deal Brexit is life or death for thousands of people throughout this country, many of whom will live in Oldham. It's very serious indeed. It is right that this council is preparing as detailed in this report, but what stinks is that we simply do not have enough detail to make the preparations that we need to make to ensure the smooth running of services, not just in the council, but in the NHS and other public sector organisations. It is criminal for the government to shut itself down and not release the detail that we need to do our jobs. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Sykes to second.
I hope you got the same clock for me as you got for him, Madam Mayor. I'm sure you will have. Oh. Don't tempt me, John. Don't tempt me. 10 pages or 3 pages. That's right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I obviously rise to second this report, and I'd suggest if you don't read anything else in the Green Book, you read this tonight, because it's very scary. I think the other thing is, and maybe the leader wasn't aware, but the government has now been forced to release what Yellowhammer says, and it just gives you 4 headlines, the details yet to be published. Up to 3 months delay at ports. So just think about what sort of food. 3 months, not 3 weeks, not 3 days, not 3 hours, up to 3 month delay at ports due to checks. Electricity prices will rocket, and shortages of key medicines and food. So I'd be interested to see what the other detail is. And I think this is the point, and this isn't about rerunning the referendum or anything like that, but in the northwest of England, Brexit will impact extremely harshly, triggering Article 50 has its consequences, and unfortunately those will be clear all too soon. Irrespective of this, I commend the determination and hard work of the Council to carry that burden and to see what we can do to minimise the impact of the people of our borough. But it's very hard to minimise the impact when you don't know what the plan is. And if ever there was a reason that you don't set off on a journey if you don't know where you want to end up, this is it. Except we're going to mess about with tens of thousands of people's lives and life chances, and that of their children and of their children's children. There's been £1.5 million of financial promises and drip-fed support from the UK government to lessen the huge impact of manufacturing that Greater Manchester will receive if we leave with no deal, and business prospects will be low and trade tariffs high. As the leaders said, already the pound is at nearly an all-time low, and you just, wherever you go, if you set foot outside the United Kingdom, just set foot into Southern Ireland and see how little your pound goes. And we're officially on the edge of a recession, and that's by the target set by the financial monitorers, not by any else. And this isn't project fear, but it's project fact. Brexit will leave the costs of all the chaos with the people of Oldham Borough with fewer pounds in their pockets. Amongst the risks stated in the report, there are mentions of no signs of community unity issues in relation to Brexit in Oldham. It's the only aspect of the report I think I would wish to challenge and want some further work to be done on. That's not my experience when I move around this borough, and as the leaders already said, instance of racial hatred rose immediately after the referendum, and while they might have receded, they have not dropped back to pre-levels. So I find it hard to believe that one line in this report is true. So if it is, I'd welcome it, but I doubt it and I question it, and I'd like some further work done on that. And we need to remind, I don't need to remind Council, that this is a diverse borough with large immigrant populations who will be affected by any change in their legal status. The other thing is, there's also an ever-widening and unfriendly rift between those who voted leave and voted remain. Is it an EU spider or a non-EU spider then?
Just a bigger now.
Right, is it? Good. Good. Has it got a passport? Has it got a ticket?
It's come over to our side.
Has it? Okay. Right, very good. So, whether people voted leave or remain in the 2006 referendum, we need to keep an eye on the simmering Thank you. We need to keep an eye on the simmering undertone of contempt between different groups in our communities and enthusiastically inspire solidarity in our borough. The overarching concern is how much the council will be supported by the government financially to manage the fallout of a no-deal Brexit. Of the £105,000 granted to Oldham Borough by the government to deal with Brexit, as far as I'm aware, only about 20,000 has so far been released. I think the leader's already hinted that is a drop in the ocean. I'm not quite sure what you do with it. It's probably about enough to buy everybody a drink so we could all drown our sorrows. But seriously, we do need to tackle this issue. I hope the government keeps to its announcement and other appropriate funding priorities are realised and sought after by the council. But this is all public money that could be spent on other things, improving our health service, education, looking after our old people, fixing our roads, take your pick. And I do fear Brexit and its impact will become a regular feature, John, on these council meetings. So if you're bored of it now, you're going to be bored of it, whatever. It matters not if you voted Leave or Remain. The impact will be great, even with a deal. And it would be wrong if we did not question and debate one of the biggest issues in our borough and how it impacts upon our citizens. I thank you, Madam Mayor, and commend the report to you with that one caveat about the community cohesion issues.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak?
Madam Mayor, I wish to speak because I think freedom of speech is essential when 17 million people aren't listened to, neither nationally or locally, and we get this project here without a reply. And it's disgusting. I think most people are fed up whether they voted Leave or Remain. They just want the damn thing done and move on. I think Brexit's become a dirty word, and I think that this administration is to be commended for bringing out a plan for if there is no deal. I don't want that to happen, and I dare say most people don't want that to happen. They would prefer to leave with a deal. And I think, as the leader says, they can only answer what they know at the moment. So I do support this document, and I think it's done its best to answer what many of us feel is unanswerable. We haven't been given from any party. I mean, Mr Corbyn now says he doesn't know whether he'll vote to Remain or Leave. He's decided that the Labour Party aren't going to be the party of Remain. So this is a difficulty for everybody, whichever party, whichever colour, or wherever you go. You've got to remember that we are in a council chamber which represents people and democracy, and 17 million people said they want, I mean the majority, it was far bigger than any of us got in here. So, I mean, all right, it were near 52-48, but it's 4%. I suspect in May, many of us would be happy to get 4% and get back on the council. So we've got to take into account whether we like it or not, Madam Mayor. And I do congratulate the authority for at least bringing out a document that tries. But I don't like it to be politicised, and I don't think it's necessary. And I think people in Oldham would expect us to just go along with whatever has happened. If we get a Labour government, as I say, we don't know whether we're going to Leave or Remain, because he won't say. So we know what the Liberals would do, but I don't think, in my opinion, they're going to win the election. But that's just me. But I'd congratulate them, but I do think people will want it without the politics.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, it seems to me that the first duty of the government is to govern, and I think we have a government which is, seems to be signally unable to do that. We certainly don't have a government which seems to understand what following the rule of law means. And I think also that the responsibility of the government is to maintain order and provide for the welfare of its citizens. And what the Operation Yellowhammer document show quite clearly is that the threat of a no-deal Brexit calls all of that into doubt. And I think it's our duty as the council for this borough to be prepared. And I welcome the fact that we have a report in front of us tonight. But what really concerns me about this and about what there is in the Operation Yellowhammer report is that it says that the low-income groups will be disproportionately affected. And what that means, given that Oldham is a low-income, low-wage borough, is that many of the citizens in Oldham will be disproportionately affected by the threat or the actuality of a no-deal Brexit. And the kind of concerns that Councillor Fielding has highlighted from the report are the things that really concern me. So when you look at issues around food supply, do you remember what it was like when Kentucky Fried Chicken closed down? You know what, and that's fast food that we've also briefly touched on tonight. And so what do you think is going to happen if people think there's going to be a shortage of food in supermarkets? There's not going to be people saying, oh, well, that's all right, I'll just buy
What's happening in World War II? We got through it.
Right, so I'm really pleased that Councillor Hudson has raised the issue of World War II, because I have to say that I find the eagerness of the European Research Group and other members of the Conservative Party to spend their time saying that we all did wonderfully in World War II and that they seem to want to go back and fight it again. Quite frankly, if people want to get into dressing up in uniforms and reenacting the war, I suggest they all go off and join Sealed Knot instead of talking in that way about things that are really important and could have really serious consequences for the health and welfare of our citizens. So as I was saying before I was interrupted,
oh, what a shame.
I am concerned about whether people have enough to eat. I'm concerned about whether people have fuel for their cars. Do you remember what happened in the fuel blockade in the 1990s? It took 24 hours to bring the country to its knees and for ambulances not to have enough fuel to take people to hospital. And I'm also concerned about the issues that Councillor Sykes and Councillor Fielding referred to around the well-being of our fellow citizens, many of whom don't know what their rights are going to be, whether or not they can stay in this country, and on the basis that they can do so. And many of these people provide essential services for all of us in the health service, in welfare services, and in helping to protect our food chain supply. So I think that it's right that we've got this report in front of us. It's right that we are considering the implications. And I also feel that it's something that instead of, as right at the beginning of this meeting, Councillor Fielding referred to the fact that we are in a society now where people seem to think that if you disagree, that somehow that people are telling lies, not telling the truth, and all the rest of it. And I actually think that we need to debate out the issues, look at the evidence, and plan and do our best to protect our citizens.
Thank you. Councillor Chauhan.
Madam Mayor, I'm not trying to make a political point. I just want to make a human point, and I have a lot of personal respect for Councillor Hudson. Honestly, it's not about politics. It's not about Project Fair. I expect people who are in power to be honest and transparent to us. And you know, Second World War, we know all the stories when very, very few rich people, their families were leaving this country and going to America and spending time there, and when the war was over they came back. There are people who actually never seen what the poverty is. And if you live in Northwest now, come to my surgery in Failsworth. I run a food bank from my surgery, and that's been running on the donation of general public from Failsworth. Now tell me please, if people don't have food to eat for themselves, how they're going to donate for those who need it? If talking about the storing food, what's going to happen with those people? The worst impact any community will face will be the Northwest. We are already struggling with our hospitals. But Madam Mayor, more than that, it's already impacting on people. Look at the mental health impact it's having already. The story Councillor Fielding told about a gentleman who was shaking. Why is that? It's not nothing to do with Brexit or not Brexit. It's because of the uncertainty. You expect, and you expect from this administration, and you will expect from administration in 10 Downing Street to be transparent. Why do you need to hide your yellow hammer, or call it blue hammer? I don't know what they call it, yellow hammer, but should have been blue hammer plan. But why they need to hide that? Just be transparent and share it with public. I sincerely hope, it's not project fair, I sincerely hope that whatever the outcome of Brexit or no Brexit is, that our state, who should be a guardian, who should be a mother to the residents, to the citizens, will actually think about many, not for few. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlet.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very briefly, touching on the points of Councillor Hudson in regards to his freedom of speech and obviously World War II. Well, in World War II, at least Parliament sat. They didn't prorogue it. And of course, when you talk about Project Fear, it's difficult to... We're not portraying that. We're trying to portray the truth and we're asking for the truth. And it's difficult to portray these facts and figures when we have no lawmakers to govern. And when, of course, a particular court in Scotland says that the decision made by your Prime Minister was illegal, and that Parliament should return. The decision has not yet been made to recall Parliament, and that way we can actually finally have whether a clear choice or a clear answer regarding this issue. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Shuttleworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The leader alluded to the 69% or 68% who didn't vote to leave. And during all this debate, one thing that's really annoyed me is when all you hear from the Conservative Party is we've got to follow the vote for the 17 million who voted to leave. In other words, the rest of you, shut up and go home. That isn't democracy. You hear democracy all the time from people like...
Councillor Hudson.
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hudson, please refrain from interrupting. Give them the courtesy you would like. Well, it doesn't matter. Please refrain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, we talk about democracy. We have a Prime Minister who would appear is now hell-bent on taking this country out of the European Union without a deal, despite what he says. And he's been put there by about 96,000 Tory voters, not by the people of the country. And he's probably been put there by... Madam Mayor, I wish you'd be quiet, Councillor Hudson, for a while. It's democracy. Listen to the other people, and that's the problem with your party. You don't want to listen to others.
Councillor Hudson, please give people the courtesy. You wouldn't like them interrupting you, so please... No, they don't. No, they don't. Please give them the courtesy.
So as I was saying, Madam Mayor, it's about 96,000 Tories, most of them down south, who have put Pinocchio Johnson into 10 Downing Street. And I'm sure some of those 96,000 were under 18. And what did the Conservative Party do when it came to the European election? They denied the vote for under 18s. So those kids of 16, 17, coming up to 18, who have put Johnson in, weren't allowed to vote in the referendum. Is that democracy? Is it democracy for somebody to vote against his own party on 2 occasions, then to take office after he'd managed to get rid of the Prime Minister and then boot out 21 of his own members because they disagree with him? That isn't democracy, that's dictatorship. And what we need to do is to get round the table and listen to what people have got to say, not clear off to Europe and speak to Merkel and Macron and say, I can come up with a deal in 30 days for the backstop, and then crawl away and do nothing. We don't need somebody in 10 Downing Street who prorogues Parliament, goes to Balmoral, speaks to the Queen, and from what has been said today, has given her false information. Is that the way we want a government to behave? I voted Remain, and if I got the chance again, I'd vote Remain again. I'm not ashamed to say it. If we can get a deal, I will support a deal because I believe in democracy. But I'm not going to be dictated to by somebody like Johnson who doesn't know the difference between fact and fiction. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Fielding on his words at the start of this, and to go back to the report. Some of the issues that are in the report, and I think there could be more detail about this. There's some dry figures about £400 for people in the lowest fifth of earnings each year. That's what their loss is already. But that, as Councillor Roberts alluded to, in Oldham, that's not the lowest. The lowest fifth of earners is a much larger proportion of the people in Oldham. It's nearly 50% of the people in Oldham who have lost a minimum of £400 already. So what I care about, and what this report is starting to look at, is not whether people voted to leave or to remain, but how can we help people who are poor and losing money, and we need to be able to deal with that. You know, people are affected by poverty and by increasing poverty and the unnecessary increase in poverty that this is causing. If I believe in democracy, I believe in democracy because everybody here is here to help those people. And we should be standing up for those people and what they are losing, whether we talk about whether they remain or whether they leave the European Union. This report is part of how we help people. And that's the most important part of democracy. Thank you.
Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I thought, as we've been here tonight, the Yellow Hammer documents have been released to the public, though they have cut out a small portion about Northern Ireland. And they amount to 6 pages. And this report before us is 11 pages. So we have done more preparation, it seems, in Oldham than they have down in Westminster. And in this report, I'm just going to read this here, an increase in inflation following EU exit would significantly impact adult social care providers due to increasing staff and supply costs and may lead to provider failure, with smaller providers impacted within 2 to 3 months and larger providers 4 to 6 months after exit. I mean, that's shocking. And I know that everyone here, we all represent people who are reliant on adult social care, and it's one of the biggest spends of our council. That is a terrifying thing, and it really will put people's lives at risk. And as Councillor Fielding mentioned, the gentleman with Parkinson's, they've also said that those supply chains of medicines will be particularly vulnerable to severe extended delays, and we will end up possibly with a situation where lorries will have to wait for 1.5 to 2 days to cross the channel. So I just think it's shocking that this is the kind of situation where we're ending up in, and we need to do everything we can to ensure that we as citizens fight back against this undemocratic prorogation of Parliament and this catastrophic potential that is no deal. Thank you.
Councillor Fielding, wish to reply?
Yeah, why not? So, I think there's probably one particular member that will be the focus of the comments that I'll make in my reply. You would expect me to agree with the members from this side of the chamber, and it is, I don't know whether it's refreshing or good or troubling to agree with the Liberal Democrats as well, quite a significant amount this evening. Terrifying. So, Councillor Hudson talked about freedom of speech and that this report and other debates have been project fair without a right of reply. Well, I was sat here, there's 59 other members sat here, and as far as I'm concerned, Councillor Hudson's opportunity to stand up and speak on this report was his right of reply. If you have an issue with the details of the report saying that households are £400 per year worse off, then either defend that or dispute it in your right of reply that you were afforded. If you think that lower food standards for children's meals at school are okay, an acceptable price to pay for Brexit, whatever it is that we're meant to be gaining from this, or you don't believe them, defend that or dispute that in your right of reply. The way that we make decisions in this chamber is by debating them out and taking a vote. If there were more grown-up debate on the reality and the facts in the referendum campaign back in 2016, perhaps we would be in a different position. But I'd like to finish on saying that the referendum was not the only vote that took place in 2016. There was a local government election in the ward of Failsworth West, and the Labour candidate in that election secured 60% of the vote, and that Labour candidate was me. And I'm up for election in 2020, and perhaps I should try and employ the argument ahead of the election next year that 60% of people voted for me in 2016. Why do I need to face the electorate again? Shall I give that a go, and I'll see how far I get? Thank you, Madam.
Does Council agree the recommendation as detailed within the report? Item 13, Treasury Management Review. I call on Councillor Jabbar to move and Councillor Fielding to second the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before I move the report formally, can I just inform the Council that Oldham Council was the first local authority to close its account for 2018-19, and I think it's appropriate, Madam Mayor, that I thank the senior management team, Dr. Caroline Wilkins, our Chief Executive, Deputy Chief Executive Helen Lockwood, and Borough Treasurer and her team who led the work. I think we beat Westminster, a flagship authority, so I'm really proud of the team that's worked on this. Thank you. I'm happy to move the Treasury Management Review 2018-19. Thank you.
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Gloucester.
Yeah, thanks. As Abdul's opposite number, I'll reiterate what he says. What does worry me is that, to my understanding, the combined authority still hasn't settled their accounts.
Councillor Jabbar, do you wish to reply?
That's well above my pay grade.
Does Council agree the recommendation as detailed within the report? Item 14, Organisational Framework Update. I call on Councillor Fielding to move and Councillor Sykes to second the report. Does any member wish to speak? Does Council agree the recommendation as detailed within the report? Item 15, Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report. I call on Councillor McLaren to move and Councillor Ahmed to second the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to move the report, but in doing so, may I take this opportunity to thank all those officers and members who have contributed to the work programme through the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, Performance and Value for Money, and of course the Health Scrutiny Subcommittee for their invaluable help and support during the past 12 months.
Second, Mr. Mayor. Madam Mayor.
Does any member wish to speak?
Madam Mayor, is this a question you have to ask, else can I do it under observations?
You can make observation.
Observation, yeah, it's fine. Madam Mayor, I've got to share this with some of the new members, because some of the new members won't have even heard of Overview and Scrutiny, they won't have even been involved yet because they've only been on the council a short amount of time. However, this is the third time Uncle Colin, that I've got up and done this, where I've spoke about his committee, and I'm just wondering, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering how Colin really feels, because over the years there's been an unusual cast of characters on that committee. Some outstanding people that have had some outstanding contributions to something that's quite unique. And people have not been involved with overview scrutiny and missing something. I've said that so many times, because to some of the new members, what's the role of that committee? We're supposed to know, when I was on it, not now, we're supposed to know the facts, information, the data about what the cabinet members are doing, what the deputies are doing, what the leadership of the council is doing. It's daunting. And there's times where I've walked through that committee and I've thought, how effective have I been on this? And there's times when I've had to question to myself, hang on, am I really doing what I'm supposed to be doing? There's times, Madam Mayor, many, many years ago, and some of the Lib Dems, all the Lib Dems will remember this, and some of ours, that when overview scrutiny came along initially, at its time it started, most of the members won't even dare challenge the cabinet members, because it's like saying, I can't do that, these are my mates, I can't go and collar these in public. Well, that's changing, isn't it, Colin, a little bit, even to the officers, where they're now willing to go and dig in, move the drawer around, look in the officers' eyes, fathom the soul, see what they're thinking about. And some of these guys have done it brilliantly over the years, and I've tried to do it myself a little bit. Just want to share this final thing with you all. You know what, Colin, when you go and think about it, you have to go and ask Madam Mayor the question, how good is this committee? And one officer turned to me once, instead of remaining nameless, Stephen, you could be doing so much better than this, and they're right. However, under Colin's stewardship and the way he controls this committee, when he first started, I did not like that guy one bit. Put your hand up to speak, you don't interrupt, and you speak when you're spoken to. What? Colin, I just want to ask a question. But as time went by, I realised, Madam Mayor, he was exactly right to control it that way. So he's got a tight ship, he runs it real well, but I'm just thinking, from my personal point of view, that committee doesn't fail because of him and those other members. So I'm just wondering, in his heart, when his edits a pillar out, does he think he's doing something good? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Williamson.
Colin's not mine.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Mayor, but I just want to put on record, Colin is not my uncle. It might be Steve's, but not mine, because I've been on overview and scrutiny as many times as Steve has. Overview and scrutiny has done an enormous amount of work over the past year, and it's good to read the report. So well done, Colin and everybody. However, can I seek clarification on what I think is an important issue? Can I ask if members who proposed and seconded a notice of motion, which goes to overview and scrutiny, like tonight, which was the ban on fast foods and energy, are invited to participate in workshops or task and finish groups? It's just, I feel that they've got some knowledge, because obviously they've done a bit of research to put the notice of motion together. So if they are not, can I request that in future they are extended an invitation to attend the meetings, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Does the mover wish to reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to note Councillor Williams' comments, and glad to see that he continues to do his best to support the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, and we'll take on board Councillor Williams' comments and see whether there has been any oversight on the part of invitations to individual members to participate in workshops, etc. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah.
Thank you. Does Council agree the recommendation as detailed within the report? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the meeting. Oh, he's in a hurry.